Marvel's new Captain America has a bit of a complicated past with a few valid crash outs here and there. So what I want to do in this one is put together the full story for his origin, which is covered in Our Secret Wars written by Chip Zdarsky, because there's a lot of elements here that go straight into One World Under Doom and the build up to Armageddon. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so to cover the full origin of David Coloulton, we've got to go back to the beginning of Chip Zdarsky's 2025 Captain America series, where aside from the introduction of David Coloulton, this also tells the story of Steve Rogers, who's fresh out of the ice and coming back to the modern day. So naturally, for the modern telling of this story, it takes us back to the early 2000s, by opening with September 11th of 2001, with David witnessing the September 11th attack firsthand. And in this introduction, we get what is essentially a letter from David, which will make more sense as this continues, with it saying, "You think you're prepared to see death, but violent death, a man taking a man's life, it's a very different thing. It changes you in ways you know immediately, and ways you discover later, in the darkness, when you're as alone as you've ever been. And when death happens on a massive scale, you fight the terrible thought that soon comes. Are we worth saving? And if we are, am I willing to become the thing that I hate to save us? Am I willing to be a killer?" And now after this, we hop over to some blonde-haired guy grabbing a bite at a diner who just happens to overhear talks of a shooting and a suspect 1033 subject on the move from a nearby cop's radio. So he goes to check it out, which leads him to 3 other officers, and 2 of them have clearly been shot. When he gets there, he's like, "Where's the shooter?" And one of the officers, she doesn't even look. And she just tells him he took my bike, went down Madison, and said he was heading to the UN building to kill them. So that's where this stranger asks, "Where is this UN building?" So she tells him 1st and 43rd. Then she's like, "Wait, how you don't know where the UN building at?" Only for her to then realize this guy is not a police officer, but instead, this dude is Captain America. And at this point in time, it's going to be a shock to a lot of people, with most believing that he was dead and gone since World War II. But when Steve catches up to this guy, he notices right away that this guy's been trained. He knows how to ride and fire. But there's also this question in his mind on whether it's a hired gun, like if he's working for someone. So Steve's kind of got to figure this out as he goes. And now this guy's moving, so to stop him, Steve's got to get above him. So he banks a shot with his shield to knock this dude's bike over. But when he does, he notices this dude's got a bomb strapped to his chest. And as soon as he sees it, he's like, "Please God, don't let that thing go off." But even with the story giving us an opening like this, which is basically showing us Steve Rogers getting back into the action after all these years, you have people who are in disbelief seeing him, whether it's civilians or any of the other officers. But also when he finally catches up with this guy, there's something about the way he handles the situation. And part of it's just him talking to the dude, because Cap asks if he's military. And the guy tells him, Army, 2nd Lieutenant, 2 tours in the Gulf. And he simply just has a conversation with him. And I mean, part of it still is that Steve Rogers Captain America pull, but he has a conversation with him and he listens. Because this guy's in a place where he just feels like no one else cares, while everyone he knows dies, and the rest of the world just goes on living their lives. But Steve gets through to him, because he talks to the guy with respect, he addresses him as Lieutenant, and I mean, the captain does pull rank shortly after, but he gets through to him, and he gets him to drop the detonator. But when Cap asks this guy to shut down a bomb, he's basically like, "Well, I didn't think about that part. You know, that wasn't exactly the plan." But fortunately, Tony shows up and he disables it over wireless. And again, with this being a new world that Cap's being brought back to, where he's only been back for 1 week after being discovered by the Avengers and thawed out. But over time, we'll see Steve discover how much the lines have blurred since he's been gone. Because even now when he's like, it's amazing, the idea of a United Nations. Like, this wasn't here when he went into ice. It started right after. So he asks Iron Man, "And you say it's designed to stop future world wars?" And Iron Man's like, "That's a big part of why it was founded, though there's always a debate about its efficacy." And Steve's just like, "Nothing is ever straightforward, is it? But it's nice to see that the world has at least tried." So Iron Man asks Cap if he'll join the Avengers, because they even have a benefactor by the name of Tony Stark who has government connections. Because in the here and now, it's not really known that Tony Stark is Iron Man. But Steve turns this down and he tells him that he already belongs to an organization, that's the US Army, and it's time he returned to base. And when we go to another flashback for David Coloulton, after what happened at 9/11, he wants to serve. But when he went to enlist, he was rejected by the US Armed Forces. And even with them telling him no, he's still not leaving. And one of these guys even tell him, like, "Look, you have severe, persistent asthma. Your vision is 20/60. And frankly, you look like a strong wind to snap you in two." But this tenacious approach from Coloulton, it gets the attention of one of the nearby sergeants. So he ends up getting in. However, his mom isn't too crazy about the idea. Because for one thing, she thinks this is all about revenge, and the other, which ends up pushing David and his mother apart, is the fact that they've already lost his older brother Brian in Kuwait. And with David being smaller in stature, she thinks he's just getting ready to get himself killed. And she even tells him at one point, you need therapy, not a gun, not some racist war. And she even tells him, my heart breaks for everyone who died, but it's also breaking for everyone about to die. And you can just see how difficult it is for the both of them, not only with just talking about his brother Brian, but also with the tug of war between what she wants David to do and what David wants to do. And this continues in his letter with him saying, I never faulted those who stayed at home. I look at the men in the trenches and can see those who should have stayed behind, a fear that runs through them so deep to face the horrors of war. My eye trains on them in battle, distracted by what they'll do. I couldn't stay behind, not while they were out there. Which goes back to why he wants to get out there and fight. It's not just about him. But nonetheless, some of the other fellas, they catch David crying on the phone. So they basically tell him, we're gonna whoop your head when we get outside, boy. And that is exactly what happens. And really, these other guys, they think because David is smaller and not as strong, that he's gonna be a liability in the field. So they're extra hard on him. And he continues saying, my life has been a succession of bullies. They seek out the weak, and I just radiated weakness. But I fought back. I always fought back. It didn't matter that I rarely won. And when the world turned dark and the bullies gathered, I did what I've always done. I lifted my fists and prepared for the pain. Which from here, this leads to a moment that changes everything. Because later, when the sergeant finds David with his flashlight on after lights out, he snatches him up and drags him outside. And even now we see David reading this book called American Letters, Captain America Notes from the Front Lines. Which goes to show that he was clearly inspired by Captain America, with Steve Rogers being the kid from Brooklyn that was bullied, who was also determined to serve. But when the sergeant catches David with his light on, after lights out, he ends up getting dragged out. And the sergeant's telling David all kind of things like how he's a mistake and how he's an embarrassment and how the other recruits were right when they said David's gonna get them killed. And now when this happened, there's a couple things that I'm thinking. And to be clear, I have no military background. So you guys who know, you can fire off in the comments. But I imagine if you have lights on during lights out, I imagine it's more about discipline than anything else. Because if you can't exercise discipline in training, let alone in the field, then you're gonna get yourself and a lot of other people killed. But the other thing I'm thinking while the sergeant's just beating the mess out of David is that this is a test. And of course the other recruits are like, okay, what's going on? And some are happy to see it. But for the sergeant, I imagine he's really trying to push David to see if he'll give up, which he does not. When the sergeant calls him a crybaby like the other recruits did, David's like, I'm not crying. He puts his hands up, he takes the beating, and he's like, I'm not leaving. I'll never leave. Which eventually leads to lights out for David. But when he wakes up and he's struggling to reach his inhaler, the sergeant is right there. And he tells David it must be tiring, being so damn feeble, your soul, your spirit wanting more, and your body saying no, but you didn't stay down. It's not in you, is it? So what if I told you, Mr. David Coloulton, the weakest damn recruit I've ever witnessed, that I could cure that asthma? Which again goes back to why I believe the sergeant was testing David, because now he knows David really has heart, and he's not the type to stay down. And then back over with Steve Rogers, who's doing all sorts of training exercises after returning to the US Army, which he did by just marching right into the Pentagon. And initially there was doubt about him actually being Steve Rogers, but after he flew through all these different obstacles with flying colors, proving to be, quote, the perfect specimen, eventually these scientists were like, yeah, no doubt about it, he's him. And it comes to a point where this is eventually stopped by General Thaddeus Ross, because he's seen everything he needs to see, he's read Steve's debrief, and now he's got some questions. So he starts out by asking Steve, why are you here, soldier? Why walk into the Pentagon, a place that didn't even exist when you were last roaming this planet? From what we can tell, that maladjusted crew funded by Tony Stark seems only too eager to have you. It's a new world, the war is long over, and you can go anywhere you wished. So again, why here? And that's where Steve pauses for a moment as he thinks back to the last moment where he saw Bucky, which is where he believed Bucky died. And he tells the general this past week that he's been back, he's seen some amazing things, but everyone he cared about in the world he knew before, they're all gone. Bucky's dead, his parents died before he enlisted, everyone's gone. So he tells the general, the only thing that mattered to me, that still exists, still does what I needed to, that can make sense of this world, is here with the men and women who serve. And you already know for General Ross, that's like music to his ears. So he starts early by getting Steve on his first mission. And we start to see this unfold when we head over to the Fantastic Four, who are currently fighting Giganto. And they were struggling until Steve showed up, holding Mole Man saying, I believe this gentleman is the source of your problems. But the reason why Steve's here is because he needs to speak to Mr. Fantastic. And the reason why he needs to talk to Reed is because Steve needs to learn about Dr. Doom. So Reed gives Steve the rundown, and he tells him how they were in college together and how Victor's brilliant and volatile. And Reed tells him how there was an accident, his face was scarred, and he dropped out. And a few years later, he resurfaced back in his home country as And right there, he's like, well, I'm sure you got the rest in his file. And this is where we find out Steve's first mission, now that he's back. It's about going after Doom following his recent takeover. Because as part of Doom taking power, he destroyed the US Embassy in Latvia and held the American diplomats as his prisoners. So Steve's being sent over there with a special team to bring them back. And when he tells us to Reed offers the help of the Fantastic Four to go with them, only for Steve to tell him that's a no-can-do. Because in this new world that's still new to Steve, America now has the atomic bomb, it has superheroes, and that has the world watching and scared. So to have superpowered beings going to other countries carrying out military operations, that's just asking for a next level world war. But at the same time, Steve's able to be an exception because of his background, so he's considered quote-unquote enhanced military because no other country is willing to stop their super soldier programs. And after this, Steve gets called in by General Ross after the last spy went dark. So now they gotta move in quick to Doomstat with hopes that their last spy's information is still good. So Ross tells him that there are 3 points in the city that they've ID'd as possibilities for where the hostages might be held. And he tells him the only man who says he knows the location for sure is Marius Wolf, head of Latvian resistance. He's located in the Northeast District in a safe house and is willing to help. And when Steve hears this, he's basically like, okay, yeah, it sounds great if this guy's still alive, because as it stands, things aren't looking good. Because this isn't like a hostage situation where Doom's making demands, because there's been no communication with Doom since the embassy attack. So to move forward, Steve asks the general, how small is their entry team? Which from here leads to Steve meeting the crew. And among them, you have people like Terry Mendoza, who just goes by Chill. And right away, dude's like, are you really him? About to shake Steve's hand off. And Steve's just like, I am. And the next person we meet, Julie Slate, who's over here looking at Chill like, bro, why you glazing so hard? But in her case, she's introduced as marksman for SEAL Team X, the Howling Commandos. So right away, Steve's over here looking like, man, they just gonna take the name of my infantry and slap it on anything, huh? So he tells Slate, like, Howling Commandos, big name to live up to, soldier. And that's where she's like, we're Marines, soldier. So he lets her know that he means no offense, just getting the lay of the land. But from here, he's like, is that it? We a 3-person team? And that's when another person steps in, telling Steve, no, sir, we're not. As David Coloulton, who's much taller than he was before, enters the room. As his letter continues saying, so I went out into the world to answer the question, can I stop the bullies? Can Captain America make the world a better place? As we go on to see David Coloulton present at the top link of Saddam's statue in 2003. Alright, so coming back, this continues with Steve Rogers and the new team making their way to Latvia. Because in this story, Chip Zdarsky's taking us back and telling us a story that spans from the early 2000s moving forward. And I had a lot of you guys asking if this is Earth 616, and yes, it is, but also part of how we're able to get these new stories that bring a lot of these origin stories into the modern day is due to things like Marvel's sliding timescale. So in the main Marvel universe, you'll have things like the date for the Fantastic Four's cosmic incident moved forward so the current stories can say that it happened 15 to 20 years ago, as opposed to saying it happened in the 60s. And there's a lot of ways to go about this, whether there's a huge reset from Secret Wars where you're rebooting the whole universe, then you have explanations like what we got from Galactus and Ewing's Ultimates, where different events in space-time hold weight and they're able to shift. But in the larger picture, and just to keep things simple for the sake of this story, just know that roughly about every 15 years or so, sometimes less than that, but after so many years, comics are going to pull these classic heroes closer to the modern day to avoid things like having your main Peter Parker turn into a 70-something-year-old Spider-Man who's talking about his younger Uncle Ben, who was hit by a bazooka, or something like that. So again, for this story, you can also think of it as a lead up to One World Under Doom, Will of Doom, Dungeons of Doom, all of that. Because at this point in the early days of Doom taking over Latvia, he had just changed the name of Hassenstadt to Doomstat. And even as they make their way there, Slate has to correct Chill on the update because it's still new. And now, as we know, their mission going into this is to save the diplomats from the US Embassy that was located in Latvia before Doom destroyed it and took them hostage. So this is an extraction. But when Slate corrects Chill on the updated name change, Steve is like, nah, we're going to continue to call it Hassenstadt. And Doom can call it whatever he wants in prison. And when I heard that, I was like, man, Cap, I felt the same way when I first heard Gulf of America. I'm like, what are we doing? But here's the thing, because when David hears Steve talking about taking Doom in, he's basically like, hey, listen, you think whoever Hassenstadt was named after was better than Doom? It's just warlords dressed as kings all the way down. Remember, Rogers, we're not here to overthrow Von Doom. This is an extraction mission. In and out. And it now has Steve wondering whether or not Major David Coloulton is on a whole different mission entirely. Because again, at this point in time, Steve is still learning how this new world works. So even when he tells the Major that things are understood as far as the extraction, the Major's basically like, I don't know about that tone. We're not going to have a problem, are we, Captain? And Steve tells him, no, sir. Still getting used to things in this time. I went to sleep in a world of chaos. We saw an enemy. We took them out. Because Steve is old school. He's ready to drop down on Von Doom and pack him up. And really, this is where we start to get a closer look at the compare and contrast between Steve Rogers and David Coloulton. Because when David tells him that this new world is still chaos, where now they just keep it in check, on the flip side, Steve Rogers at this time is still trying to figure out where he needs to make adjustments, if any at all. So when Coloulton tells him that the world is still chaos, but the chaos is kept in check with walls of order spread throughout the world, and how they are the walls, this has Steve saying to himself like, okay, for now, I'm just gonna listen. Because he says here, during the war, when I'd walk into a new country, a new village, I knew to just listen at first. This isn't my home. Let those who live here tell me how I'm needed. I need to just listen now. To my superiors, to the people who lived lives in this time. Show me the way. Captain America, show me your world. But as soon as they touch down, they lose contact with General Ross, with Doom having the signals blocked in the area. So the team's not going to have any communication with the General until they're back out and at the extraction point. But now that they're on the ground, they got to get moving right away, because their meetup spot with the Resistance is about 10 clicks out and it's 2 hours till sunrise. And now when the Major lets them know that the satellites show a clear path, this is another thing that's kind of got Steve like, man, we ain't have that in my day. Live movies from space following people, and it has him telling the Major that he's still unpacking this world and its definitions of freedom. And that's what the Major tells him. Think of it as a twist on an old classic. America watches everything and carries a big stick. The base we just came from in Romania, we've got hundreds of them all over the world. We watch, we hold the world accountable. And he tells Steve that's all thanks to you and what you did in the war. So this has Steve like, we won. What I did mattered. So why do those words haunt me? Is this what freedom means now? A world sprinkled with our military might. Our eyes always watching. And that's where they see these glowing eyes approach, coming from something that appears to be Doom, but it's not. It's a Doom bot. But they don't know that, so they let him have it. And now going into this, Reed Richards gave Steve a few pointers on Doom. Like for starters, he let him know that Doom's armor might seem heavy, but he's still fast. And on top of that, Reed gave Steve a device that would shut down Doom's armor when the time came should they get close enough to use it. So Steve tells the Major to pin him down because he's ready to use this thing now. Only for Steve to soon after have a gun pointed at his head. So he takes the guy down and come to find out, this is their contact, Marius Wolf. So when he takes them back to the outpost, he lets them know that this area is not monitored by the army, so the captains, plural, can relax. And he also explains to them how the Doom they ran into just a moment ago was a Doom bot that they captured and reprogrammed. And he lets them know like, man, this thing is totally safe. And according to Wolf's update on what's going on here, or the progress that him and the Resistance have made, he tells these guys like, hey, we're out here winning. Doom's panicked, we've managed to take territory from him and convince soldiers to defect. So in every measurable way, these guys are making progress. But the Major stops Wolf right there, and he lets him know him and his men are on the clock, because their arrangement was for Wolf to help them find the American hostages in exchange for weapons provided by the US government to help the Resistance fight their fight. But right here, Wolf tries to switch things up because he had been planning to attack Doom, and he wants Major Coloulton and the others to help him while they're here, so when they're done, they could just take their US citizens out of Latveria without having to sneak them out. But Wolf didn't plan on sharing this update until these guys got here, and Major Coloulton isn't happy about that. So he loses his temper for a moment, but Steve asks him to step outside so he can cool off and they can have a talk. And when they do, Steve kind of shows off the leadership skills a bit, and without overstepping, because at first he asks the Major to just calm down so they can consider their options. But Major Coloulton's just like, options? We're here to do a job. One job. That's what we have the okay for. So Steve tells him, I understand, sir, but things can change on the ground, and we need to make a call. And that's where Steve tells him that he'll take on Doom with Wolf, while the Major goes with the commandos to free the hostages. So if anything, it'll be like they're the distraction while the Major is accomplishing their goal. And you can tell when the Major hears this, he's looking like, well, that's not a bad plan. But even still, he tells Steve, you're talking about toppling the leader of a country, Rogers. I know you just woke up, but America is not at war here. And that's where Steve tells him Von Doom has broken international law, jailed diplomats, killed his own people, entered America illegally, and endangered our citizens. We may not be at war with Victor Von Doom, but he is at war with us. Let me help those people. And that's when the Major just looks him in the eye like, damn it, Captain America. Like, if you wasn't my childhood hero, I'd smack the stars off of you. And the Major agrees to go with it, but as he leaves, he's like, it must be nice, thinking you can make things better. So from here, they split into the two teams, where again, you got Steve, Wolf, and the Doombot, while you got the Major taking the commandos to get the hostages. But before they go their separate ways, the Major tells Steve, whatever you do, make it quick. The general's waiting for us at the extraction site, but if this all blows up, he's gonna pull out and pretend like he was never here. So Steve tells him understood. But just after, Slate asks the Major if he thinks this is a good idea, and he's like, probably not. Guy's a hero, no doubt about that. God knows I looked up to him. But he's a man lost. A man out of time. We can't let him drag us down while he figures the world out. And now after this, when we follow Steve's team, as they head from Doomstat to Doom's castle, Steve tells Wolf, like, man, everything seems so calm, so peaceful, but you can feel it, the fear. And Wolf tells him that's what happens when your ruler has eyes everywhere and threatens death to anyone who steps outside the lines he draws. And he tells him the blood of our people's already on his hands. Almost as if he's telling Steve, like, hey man, don't think it's sweet out here. But part of what's helping this plan go so smoothly is the addition of the Doombot, showing them the way to go and giving them access to routes they otherwise wouldn't have. In addition to some inside info Wolf was able to grab, so they know Doom's schedule and where exactly to find him. And now with this leading up to the big moment where it's like, okay, they're about to get Doom, Steve thinks to himself for a moment here about Hitler and how they never caught him. The war was won, peace was found, but the madman who ravaged the world, the focus of Steve's righteous anger, was never brought to justice. And he says here, I can hear the same righteous anger in Wolf's voice. So my mind turns over and over with the question, is this why I'm here? To deliver justice that I couldn't manage during my previous life? Has God put me where I need to be? And as they head into Doom's personal quarters, they find him right there below at the table. And that's where Wolf is basically like, yeah man, let me get this scope ready on this mythic level sniper rifle, because he's ready to just pop Doom and call it a day. And that's where Steve is like, Marius is in his time, about to take his moment. He doesn't need me here at all. He doesn't. Then Steve catches himself like, wait a minute, that's David's voice in his head. This isn't the mission. Cold blood. An assassination. It's not the way a country moves forward. So he stops Wolf from taking the shot and he tells him, we take him in before a court, because this isn't justice. And the Doombot agrees, just before it attacks them. Because come to find out, this reprogrammed Doombot wasn't so reprogrammed after all. And it had really just been playing Wolf the whole time by allowing him to believe the resistance took something else from Doom. But no, this Doombot's mission was just to be a mole the whole time and have Wolf believing that the resistance was winning. And now as Cap is trying to take on this Doombot, he's just like, man, there wasn't nothing like this back in my day. Speed, power, force, and here I am with a metal disc, a young man made old by the future, but too damn stupid to stay down. And eventually the Doombot presents Steve to Doom while saying, Master, it would be my pleasure to dispose of this American trash. But then this leads to Doom having a very unexpected response, because he's like, no wait, this man, the rumors out of New York City, they appear to be true. Steve Rogers, the original Captain America, scourge of Adolf Hitler, Victor Von Doom and the nation of Latvia welcome you as a hero. Alright, so as soon as this comes back, we pick up with Steve Rogers and Mr. Wolf, who have just recently walked right into Doom's trap, after trusting a quote-unquote reprogrammed Doombot. And when things settle down, to Steve's surprise, this becomes a conversation, which at this point again, this is showing us the first meeting between your modern day Steve Rogers and Dr. Doom. So when they finally meet here, Doom has some things to say, because he's like, Stephen Rogers, America born, Europe forged, a miracle of science, now a modern miracle of science, standing in front of me, truly amazing. I am a student of history, Rogers. Your fight against the Nazis was inspiring to me as a young man. Your becoming a symbol for your people resonated with me deeply. And that's what has Steve saying, Victor Von Doom, murderer, dictator. Tell me something, doctor. I just spent the last few years of my life in the trenches, hunting Adolf Hitler. What makes you any different? And that's where Doom's just like, well, Hitler was elected. I took power to save my people. And Doom goes on to explain how he's not too different from Marius Wolf, the resistance leader. And of course, Wolf gives Doom the whole, I'm nothing like you kind of response, you know? But Doom basically calls a spade, because he's like, you see me in power on the throne. You despise me. You'll do anything, kill anyone to take my place. Which really goes back to what Major Coloulton mentioned before, when he told Steve how they're just coming here to do a job, and he asked him, do you think Doom is any better than the previous leader? And Doom tells Wolf here the only difference between them is that Wolf seeks power, while Doom is power. And hearing Doom say that just had me like, yeah, I should have saw that coming. But right after that, Steve cuts to the chase because he tells Doom to release the hostages from the embassy unless he wants the full force of the United States military on his throat. And Doom's basically like, it breaks my heart hearing you say those words and, you really believe what you're talking about. And Doom tells him here, they clad you in the dark star, and yet still you shine through with your light. Which throughout this story that has 5 parts, like a 5-point star, with the story being called Our Secret Wars, we're given a number of comparisons between both Steve and David's struggles, which are like the inverse of one another. And the dark star versus the bright star, they represent those things as well, with the current times trying to make Steve darker and make David appear as this bright and perfect symbol. But in the here and now, Doom honors Steve's request, because next Doom radios to Sergei, telling him to prepare the Americans for release. And that has Steve thinking like, no, wait, it can't be that easy. Can it? Like all I had to do was ask? And I didn't even say the magic word. So while they wait, Doom prepares to take Steve on a tour, so he can see how things aren't so bad for the people now that Doom is their new leader, now that he's taken Vladimir's place. And now as they head out, this is where we jump back over to Major Coloulton in the Howling Commandos, or the new Howling Commandos, I should say, who as planned have made their way to the United States Embassy in Latvia where the hostages are being held. And now aside from these 3, where from left to right we have Chill, Major Coloulton, and Slate, aside from them we also have members of the Resistance, who are like your locals who teamed up with Marius Wolf. But as they head in, both Major Coloulton and Slate are like, hey, this is a little too easy. And once they're in, the Major sees something that isn't actually there, because the path is clear. But the Major sees this kid running down the hallway, which is taking him back to a memory that we'll talk more about in a little bit. But eventually he lets the commandos and the others know that they're clear, so they move forward till they eventually reach a door where they hear some people speaking in Latvian on the other side. So they kick the door down, because without a doubt this is the room where the hostages are being held. In bags. Because Doom already had these people killed. But even still, there's something off here that the Major notices in just a moment. But before they even get to that, they start taking down these Latvian soldiers. And the Major makes sure to tell Chill not to kill the last one, because the Major counted 10 bodies. And there's supposed to be 12. So he asked this guy where the other 2 hostages, because also pertaining to what Major Coloulton had thought he saw in the hallway, this takes us to a flashback from when he was serving in Afghanistan, where at the time there were some of his men saying how much they missed Baghdad because of the functioning toilets, and others saying how they'd rather be back home, which kind of stirs up an argument. And when the Major tried to calm it down, he would also find himself being disrespected, where it was like, okay, yeah, well, Captain America got something to say. But more specifically when he saw this kid wearing what looks to be a football jersey with a Stark sponsor on it. But when the Major saw this kid, he knew where this was heading. And surely enough, shortly after him and his team were marked, they were hit by a car bomb attack. So this is basically what's going through Major Coloulton's mind. And now, in addition to this, we also have the letter that Major's been writing, which we've been seeing from the start of the series, as it continues saying, I can barely remember home. Stopped writing back to mom. Got too hard. It felt like she was writing to a different son. Someone I used to know. Someone I'd miss if I felt anything anymore. And following the bomb attack, the letter continues with him saying, my ears decided to make noise of their own, so I wouldn't hear the crying, the screaming. We'd count the dead later, but who is alive now? And what were they doing in the chaos? Move. Help. That's all that was on my mind. And my mom. Waiting for a letter from a ghost. And this is where one of his men end up taking out the kid that marked them. Because in this moment, as Major Coloulton's holding this kid who didn't deserve this. It's a kid. And he's also in a place where he's lost because he hasn't spoken with his mother in so long. This moment begs the question of like, okay, what is he going to do now? Like, how do you respond when someone who couldn't defend themselves is just murdered in cold blood? And we get David Coloulton's answer. But before that, we're given a similar scenario for Steve Rogers. Because currently as Doom's giving him a tour of Doomstat, he pulls one of the people over to the side, who's like this older lady with a shop by the name of Mildred Krieger, and he asks her how life's been since the fall of King Vladimir. And he tells her to say it in English, so of course Steve can understand. And she's basically like, since Doom has been in charge, things have been great, because he keeps them safe, and thieves used to loot her stands sometimes twice a week, but now they wouldn't dare. And that's where Wolf just screams out like, yeah, because to do so means death. So to Marius, with Doom having their people live in terror, to him this isn't an improvement to what they had before. And for Steve, trading freedom for safety and prosperity is still too high of a price. So Doom continues to take Steve on this tour. And as he does, he expresses his respect for Captain Rogers, even if his own country does not. And then he goes on to show Steve these different monuments, starting with one that expresses how the Latvians showed up when they were called to fight the Germans in the First World War. And Doom goes on to tell him that the Latvians did the same in World War II. And he says here, "My admiration for you may seem at odds with our system of government, but the heart of us is the same, Stephen Rogers. When evil shows its face, we fight as men." And this is where Doom shows Steve the next monument, which is in honor of Steve, Bucky, and the Howling Commandos. And now this immediately has Steve thinking of how he lost his anchor, which for a long time was Bucky. And this has Steve thinking to himself like, Bucky, what would you do now in the face of all this? You would kill him, wouldn't you? Stop his madness from spreading across Europe? Maybe you should have been the one to wake up here. And now as Steve is saying these things to Bucky in his mind, asking Bucky these questions, almost as if he's waiting for a response from Bucky. Basically waiting for a letter from a ghost. Doom's here telling Steve how he has a certain fondness for America, and how America is potential, and how once in a while potential breaks through, with that potential being Steve Rogers, with how he saved Latvia and saved the world, and that earned him a place in their history. And his people should remember what America once was. And Doom goes on to say here, "You've awakened to a new world, Captain. Freedom, democracy. Your country uses these words that you made golden and perfect all those decades ago. They use them to cover their atrocities and their cold grip on the world. America is now the enemy." And for a moment, this has Steve thinking and asking Bucky, is he right? Am I a fool for falling back in line? Or can I still trust my eyes and heart? And right there, Wolf is like, man, don't listen to him. And Steve says here, it's okay. I may be a man out of his time, and I don't know America anymore. Not yet. And he tells Doom, perhaps you're right. I may end up a citizen without a country. I don't know this world, but I know people. There are good ones and bad ones. That never changes. And you, Victor Von Doom, you're a bad one. And now it's in this very moment where Major Coloulton radios Captain Rogers. And this is going directly into Steve's ear, so it's not like Doom hears this. But the Major gives him an update, and he's like, they're dead. He murdered the hostages. The ambassador's spouse and kid are still alive, and we're heading to them. Radio back when you're clear. Over. And now as Steve is listening to all this, Doom can tell that he's distracted, and that's where Doom's like, Captain, is your mind elsewhere? Perhaps with your friends at the embassy? And Steve doesn't say anything, he just tightens the strap on his shield, just before he gives Doom a mean uppercut. That's also very satisfying for some reason. And I mean, I got love for Doom, but he deserves a few of these every now and then. Got his mask looking both ways. But Doom goes on here like, did you think I was unaware of the other Americans and your feeble rebels? This helpful automation has been with Wolf's rebels for weeks, charting the group's every movement. But now that its espionage days are over, I say it's finally time to gather you all for a public execution. Then he's like, Doombot 7, which is the Doombot that was playing undercover this whole time. He's like, Doombot 7, please keep Mr. Rogers entertained, but do not kill him. I want to send him back to his leaders broken, yet alive. So Steve gives the others the heads up, as far as Doom knowing everything. And this takes us back to what Steve's thinking when I'm saying he played us. I thought I was buying time, but it was Doom buying time, sending his troops out into the city to gather and kill his enemies. I'm a fool, too young or too old for this world. And I can only imagine in this very moment, Cap is like, man, what is all this? Green lightning, missiles coming out the shoulders? Man, what's next, the whoopee cushion? But he continues here saying, a relic, a soldier who doesn't yet know the war they're in. Then he remembers some of the things he learned from Reed, with him saying Reed Richards is no relic though. He's a man on the cutting edge, who understands Doom and his creatures, their strengths and weaknesses. And that's where Steve's able to draw his knife and stab this Doombot in the neck. And, loosen it up a little bit, because when he gets back to his shield, the Doombot's like, you won't. And Steve's like, I will, gladly. Just before he takes its head off, just scrapping this thing. Only for Steve to then quickly learn about the Doombot's self-destruct feature, which from here takes us back to David Colton's story, just after one of his men took it upon himself to gun down the little one. And the dude tells David like, hey, the kid ran, he knew. And you can just imagine this guy, he's kind of flipping out too, because he goes from telling Coloulton that Parker died in the explosion, like she's dead, and that he's sorry about what he did, but then he's like, no, bump that. It's them or us. If the kid wants to play with the big boys, then he can get taken out like, and let me tell you, this whole time, Coloulton, his eyes are bloodshot red, tears running down his face. And the next words in his letter just say, Mom, I'm sorry. Just before he goes shield to grill on this guy, before jumping on top of him and just swinging for who knows how long. And now the flashback and what's currently happening, they end up overlapping to give us a bit of a comparison with Coloulton's story that started with an explosion and Steve's story that ended with one, for the time being, like he's still alive. But this goes on with Steve's thoughts and him saying, Bucky, it hurts so much. Not the pain. The physical pain, that I can stand. It's facing this world without you by my side, without your voice in my ear, reminding me who I am. Something's not right. I can't believe doom, but there's something I'm not seeing. I'm a soldier who went back to base. It's what we do. And they clad me in a colder flag, a darker one. If this new world is darkness, I won't bend to it, Bucky. I can't. Damn him. Doom is right. I have to be a light. Alright, so when we come back, things calm down for just a moment, because now we pick up at the public execution of Marius Wolf, which is about as calm as things get in a story like this. But as we know, Wolf is the resistance leader who's been helping Thunderbolt Ross's team. And at the end of the day, Wolf just wants Doom out of here, because he's ruling Latvia with an iron fist, since Doom's recently took over. And his situation's really just the tip of the iceberg, because when Doom took over Latvia, Wolf started the resistance, and when Doom took the Americans hostage at the embassy, Wolf made a deal with General Ross to where Wolf would help Ross's rescue team in exchange for weapons. Because to Wolf, if Latvia is going to have a new leader, he believes that leader should move the nation to a system of democracy. But as we know, Doom ain't trying to hear that, because he doesn't believe a country should have fools and philosophers with equal say. Because if you ask Doom, he's the only one who knows what's best for his people. And he thinks the main reason why Wolf just can't get with that program is because that makes Wolf feel like he's less than a man, which is why he parades with guns in his rebellious bravado. And like throughout this, the two of them go back and forth for a bit. And I'm not gonna front, if I was there, I'd be like, man, this is entertaining. Keep it going. But nonetheless, Doom is sentencing this guy to death for basically speaking against them, but also endangering the people of Latvia. But as this public execution reaches its climax, a foreign object comes flying through, hitting the Latvian soldier who's just about to execute Marius Wolf. And soon after, we see that foreign object is the shield of Steve Rogers, Captain America, who's now wearing his classic uniform, which Doom had on the monument that he'd shown Steve before. But the whole idea behind Steve taking off the new uniform and putting back on the old one, this champions the whole idea of Steve making up his mind by not becoming dark and cold like this new world that he's woken up to after all these years. And instead, he's sticking to his old school morals and principles. And I think oftentimes people tie that to America, as if Steve's going back to the good old-fashioned American way, when really Steve Rogers' Captain America was really just a symbol of what America wishes it was, or what America's always wanted the world to believe that it is. And that's what Steve's doubling down on here, as he saves Marius Wolf and takes on Doom. And with Steve making this decision, this is also the start of him pulling away from the American government, especially after he learns about the crazy secret that we're gonna find out soon. Because while Steve's fighting Doom, Major Coloulton's reaching out to him on the comms and telling him they're under fire. Because while they were on their way to get the remaining hostages who were being held in an asylum, Doom had Latvian soldiers waiting for the Major, his team, and the resistance to cut them down. And what's funny is, as these guys are pinned in the corner here, Shield tells the Major like, hey man, why don't you take that shield and do one of those ricochet shots where you hit them all with one throw? And Coloulton's like, nah, that's the other guy. If I throw the shield, then suddenly they have a shield. But these guys are able to get out of this pinch thanks to Slate, who gives them a bit of sniper assistance from above. And with her looking out from up top, she creates a clear path for the Major and Chill, who are basically all that's left of this group after the ambush. And they're going to be on their own for a little while, since Steve is tied up with Doom and his Doombots, and he's going to need a little time to figure out how to handle them all. But back over with Major Coloulton, him and Chill end up getting one of the soldiers to show them where the hostages are being held, who at this time are the husband and daughter of Ambassador Hartley. Because again, as far as this whole rescue mission goes, these are like the last two left, since Doom ordered for all the other ambassadors to be killed. So when they get here to the room where there's no guards outside, and these two are still alive at that, it has Major Coloulton like, okay, well maybe these guys aren't monsters. And as they head into the room, Chill makes sure to dispose of their tour guide. And as you can imagine, this dad and his daughter, they're both shook. So the Major quickly goes to calm them down and let them know that he's gonna get them out of there. So he asks what's their names, and it's like Terry Hartley and his daughter Ainsley Hartley. And the next thing we see before they get going is Chill's knife going through the father's back. And now mind you, this is a complete surprise to Major Coloulton. He didn't come here for this. So he's just like, Chill, what the hell? And also when this happens, Slate makes her way back as well. And she's unfazed, which right away lets you know that she knows what's going on. So first she tells him like, sorry Cap, orders are orders. So the Major asks her like, okay, what orders were those, Slate? Murdering civilians? And that's where she drops the bombshell on him. Because she tells him, we weren't here to rescue the embassy workers. We're here to make sure they never talk. which right there, that's like bombshell number 1. And number 2 comes right after it, because then she's like, good old Uncle Sam backed Doom's overthrow of King Vladimir. We helped him to power, and he stabbed us in the back. The embassy here arranged it all, knew everything, grumbled about it, and were proven right. Then she's like, after everything that's happened, it's easier this way. Zero evidence. Sorry, Coloulton. The job's the job. So yeah, once again, with this story serving as a prequel to One World Under Doom, Dungeons of Doom, and all that, this extra bit of detail, it cranks things up to the next level. And not just with us finding out that the United States helped Doom take over Latvia to begin with, but also there's the extra detail of General Ross and others having known about this for a long time, well before One World Under Doom. So yeah, just imagine the shock for Major Coloulton finding this out in the early stages, while also being used to go on this mission where their true objective is to kill all the witnesses, who also just happen to be American citizens. But in the here and now, after Slade explains all of this to the Major, she's just like, well, the job's the job, as she goes on to continue the job by putting a hot one in the little lady. So right away, the Major just rushes Slade with his shield, knocking her through a bookshelf. And as Chill tries to step in, the Major hits him with that shield to grill attack move, and that little girl Ainsley, she just dips. And Slade chases her because she's just hell-bent on getting the mission done. And during all this, Colton's like, you guys are monsters. So Slade tells him, monsters who get the job done. And with how this goes, we jump back and forth a bit between David Coloulton and Steve Rogers, where now Doom's saying, I really don't wish to murder you, Rogers, to see you awaken after decades, only to immediately end your life. Feels rather pointless. So Steve flips things here with a bit of clever talk, because he's like, if you do it this way, this isn't you killing me. It would be you and your robot butlers. So that's where he brings up what Doom told him before, because Steve's like, you said you looked up to me as a symbol, but what kind of symbol lets machines do his fighting for him? You want to be a real symbol for your people, Doom? Then be a man first. So that's where Doom's like, hey, there's no ego here for you to toy with, Captain. Then he goes on with the whole everything I do is for Latvia. But then he admits that Steve's point is sound. Doom is a symbol. And that's when he orders his Doom bots to stand down, so him and the captain could go one-on-one, with each of them representing their countries, symbol versus symbol, Latvia versus America, to the death. And once these two get going, Doom is just spamming heavy attacks, as he tells Captain Rogers how he represented the pinnacle of humanity from a century ago, and how what Cap was then, that's what Doom is now. And now mind you, when I said Doom was spamming these heavy attacks, I wasn't playing. Because there's Latvians out here catching strays, and Steve's not able to save everyone. Like, he stops this one older lady from getting crushed, and it looks like she's the same older lady, Milda, from the marketplace in issue 3, which makes this moment even crazier. But again, Steve's not able to save everyone. So this younger guy just in front of them, he gets crushed. So as you would imagine, Captain Rogers finds this devastating. This kid had nothing to do with this. He was likely born in Latvia, and he's probably too young and too poor to choose anywhere else to live. But with Doom seeing Captain Rogers' heart go out to this kid, Doom tells him, please, Captain, the theatrics are a bit much, considering that he's not even American. And it's like, bro, I know Doom ain't talking about theatrics, what he's doing right now. The man's aura farming. But like I said, with Steve Rogers, it's not about America. To him, it's about right and wrong. Which now takes us back to David Coloulton, as he's chasing down Slade, who's chasing the embassy worker's daughter, only for Coloulton to get caught slipping, when Slade catches him off guard and sweeps the leg. And the next thing she says here also kind of hits as a low blow, because she's like, is it that costume, Coloulton? You put it on and it gives you the brain of a child? Because again, I want you guys to keep in mind the comparison that we're given between David Coloulton and Steve Rogers, where in Steve's case, he's had to make the decision on whether he was going to adapt to the present day or stick to his morals. While on the other hand with Coloulton, he's trying to do good and make the right decisions. But every time he turns around, he's put in a situation where it's like, you need to do something that's not so good, or innocent lives will be lost. Because when it comes to Slade, she's all about the mission. And in her case, I'll admit it's hard to say if whether she's this hardcore Marine who's determined to get the job done at any cost, or if she's someone who just joined up because she likes killing. Like, I'm not really sure. But right here, where this goes back to the comparison between Coloulton and Rogers, because for Captain Rogers, he's often portrayed as having the easy decision to make. Good guy versus bad guy. Take bad guy down, the end. But for Major Coloulton, we've seen the flashbacks where, in his case for years, his own troops either mocked him or disrespected him. Some took matters into their own hands at times, to where now both his superior and his team members have got their own mission going on. But at this time, as both Captain Americas prepare for their pivotal moment in each of their circumstances, Doom tells Captain Rogers here, I care for a country, and its individuals understand sacrifice for a country, much like yours once did. You Americans have lost your way. And perhaps Doom should liberate it next. And at the same time, when we see Steve reaching for the device that Reed Richards gave him, for a brief moment we see David Coloulton looking at that shield like, am I really about to do this? And both happen at the same time, because right where David Coloulton chucks that shield, Steve places Reed's device on Doom, shutting down his armor. And when he does, Captain Rogers knows that he doesn't have a lot of time, because Reed's device is only going to give him seconds here. So he basically pops L1 and R1 and hits that Brooklyn Brawler ultimate, because now Steve's going for the kill. Though not in the literal sense as in actually killing Doom, but it's more like he's killing the symbol that Doom has made himself to be in the eyes of so many Latvians, based on the twisted inspiration that he took from Steve Rogers. So for this kill shot, Steve rips off Doom's mask, and you can see Doom's reflection in the shield. It's crazy. But Steve takes off Doom's mask and he gives him a version of the shield to grill hit, which now has many of the people of Latvia just looking at Doom like, oh, he's just a man. And that's where the people of Latvia start chipping in, as Captain Rogers then says, hey Doom. Reed Richards says, hello. And you know, I'm not really sure which one hurt Doom more, whether it was the punch or him knowing that Reed Richards was a part of this, because this win for Steve Rogers, who's still trying to figure out the modern day. It wouldn't have been possible without Reed's help. And when Steve's done, Doom retreats, and Steve radios out to Major Coloulton to see if he was able to save the remaining hostages, only for Steve to hear the Major say, we're the bad guys, which of course has Steve like, oh, wait, Coloulton, what are you talking about? And that's when the Major goes on to tell him how he really feels after beating Slade unconscious, because he had to save little Ainsley. But he goes on to say here, I'm tired of being the bad guy. So freaking tired. Why do we do this, Cap? We can't leave. We need to fix it. So then Steve's like, fix? Coloulton, do you have the hostages or not? And that's where Colton's like, I can't go. I've got to stay. Don't you get it? It's the only way. I've got to stay and kill them all. All right, so going into the conclusion of our Secret Wars, this picks up just after David Coloulton's most recent crash out, which was a valid one because he had to do what he had to do to save that little girl. But back when this happened, going into this, he just learned that the US helped Doom come to power in Latvia. So for David, that feeling of betrayal is very fresh at this time, because this is back when Doom had just become ruler. But after learning this, David now feels like he needs to correct it himself. But before this goes forward, there are a couple of flashbacks that were given, starting with one that shows us the aftermath of David's other crash out from issue 3, when he attacked one of his own men after they took it upon themselves to unalive a small kid. Because really, this is what took the idea of Coloulton being your front-facing, known to the public Captain America, to being more like a ghost, who would handle missions deep in the jungle or under the cover of night. And he was told at the time, normally he would have been discharged for what he did, but because Uncle Sam spent a lot of money to make him the next Captain America, they was like, we're gonna get some kind of use out of you. So they made sure to collect all the civilian footage to basically cover up the incident. They put him in therapy and got him cleared by the doctors, and overall they just told him to take some time off. But the offers still remained for him to return and pick up the shield. So during this time off, David went back home to see his mother, who he hasn't seen and hardly spoken to for 5 years at this point. And in his case, in a similar way to what we've seen with Steve Rogers, earlier on in this story when he would often think of Bucky, when deciding if what he's doing is right, and remembering how Bucky would reel him in. For David, when he was able to talk to his mother, she was like that anchor for him, because their talks would help David recenter his thoughts and remember why he's doing what he's doing. But after he stopped hearing back from her, David no longer had that anchor, much like Steve at this time, with him being fresh out of the ice, believing that Bucky's dead and gone. But in David's case, it wasn't so much like his mother supported what he was doing, it was quite the opposite. Because after they lost his older brother when he joined the military, she didn't want the same thing to happen to David. So at this time, she was just happy that he came home. And because of their differences, oftentimes she wouldn't respond to his letters, and he would still write, though the whole time feeling like he was talking to a ghost. So during this conversation, they do quite a bit of catching up, where she tells him after September 11th, he'd left so soon. And at the time she had anger towards David for him leaving, and also towards the US because she felt like the country was looking for revenge. And she tells him here that she's still angry, but it's less like a nerve on fire and more like a dull, constant pain. And David felt the same. And he tells her here, I know you never agreed with me, but I still believe that I was there to do good, to bring democracy. But after, and she stops him right there to tell him like, it's okay, you're home now. And David goes on to tell her, I'm sorry, it's a dull pain for me too, Mom. But I feel like maybe that pain is all I have now. And again, mind you, his mother believes that it's over and that her son came home to live a normal life, so on and so forth, only for her to come home one day and he was gone. And we're shown some of this along with the letter that David wrote, which says, the doctors made me write all this to deal with what I've been going through. But in the end, it isn't for them or for me. It's for you. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't be here. Not really. It hurts too much seeing you look at me, thinking you're seeing your son. Your son is dead. I'm a killer. And I still have to make that mean something. And this is why now when we go back to the situation in Latvia, with David learning about the US helping Doom come to power, this is how he's come to the conclusion that he's going to fix it by killing everyone involved. And that's why he radios Steve saying, "It's over, Cap. I'm done. Time to clean out the barracks, then put a bullet in the despot. Give these people the future they deserve." And now at this time, Steve was just trying to see if the remaining hostages were okay, only for David to respond like this and tell him, "See you on the other side, soldier." So now this places Steve Rogers on de-escalation duty like crazy, because in this moment, just after Steve defeated Doom, this caused Doom to briefly retreat, though Doom would continue from here to be the ruler of Latvia for some time, as we know. But even with Doom running to lick his wounds, many of the Latvian soldiers were taking his orders to heart. And I mean to the point where one of them was about to smoke this old lady. But Steve stepped in and he told them to take this moment of peace and go home. And after that, he heads over to Marius Wolf, who, mind you, was supposed to be publicly executed by Doom on this day, but thanks to Steve, the man's still breathing. But Steve heads over to him to ask where the troops barracks, because he's got to get over there and stop Major David Coloulton, who's heading that way to kill everybody in sight. So for a moment, Marius Wolf is like, why stop him? And he's like, you saw how those soldiers were getting ready to boom that old lady? These people are traitors to their country. And again, for Marius, he gets a benefit in any leverage that Doom would lose, because back when the story takes place, Marius Wolf wanted to replace Doom as Latvia's new leader. And as leader of the Latvian resistance with that goal in mind, even still, Wolf really is disgusted with how many of these soldiers had just fell in line with Doom. But Steve pulls him to the side and he basically tells him, I get that. But look at these men. They're conflicted. And today is giving you greater ammunition than bullets. But if an American brutally murders Latvian soldiers, unprovoked, how do you think this is going to go? Use today to build support, not death. So Wolf tells Rogers that he can't help him. Not physically, like he's not going to go out there and help save the soldiers. But he can show Steve the way. But soon after, news travels amongst the soldiers about Captain America attacking the barracks. And when one of these guys tells the other, he's like, good, he's just one man. Surely we'll take him down and Doom will be pleased, only to get shot in the head right in the middle of his sentence. But it wasn't Coloulton who did this. It was Slate. The Marine David Coloulton mollywopped in order to save that little girl in issue 4. And now she wants to know where the barracks are, so she can kill Coloulton herself. So now it's like we got this three-way race to the barracks between David Coloulton, Steve Rogers, and Julie Slate, where all three of them are looking to walk out of here with a different solution. And 2 of these solutions involve some people not walking out of here at all. But as Steve makes his way to the barracks to stop Coloulton, not too far away he finds Ainsley, the young girl who David had saved. And when he gets there, he's like, shh, be quiet, it's okay, I'm here to help. And she's just like, yeah, that's what he said. But right away when Cap hears her talk, he recognizes her accent, which is how he knows she's American. So he tells her to stay here and he calls for an evac, even though they're nowhere near the evac site and still getting interference from the signal jammers. But Steve radios this out to General Ross because Steve doesn't know the truth yet, and he doesn't have a lot of time to get to Coloulton. But when Steve enters the barracks, he sees this glow from around the corner, and he hears a voice saying, "It's necessary, Cap. I wish it wasn't, but it is. We keep losing sight of what we're supposed to be about. Freedom." And man, when Cap looks up, he sees David Coloulton, covered in blood, with bodies laid out as far as you can see. The Latvian barracks burning to the ground. And it's like, man, this dude really took on the whole lobby. Because for Major Coloulton, he'd come to the point where now he just believes this is who he is, a killer. And if killing is what he has to do to bring the people of this country freedom, then he's going to run that kill streak off the charts. And he tells Steve here, we keep losing sight of what we're supposed to be about, freedom. And Steve tells him, David, this isn't the way. And David's like, isn't it? We're here. These soldiers are denying their people freedom. They use violence and the threat of it to keep them down. They made their choice. So Steve tells him here, we're not at war. This is a rescue mission. Some of these men you just murdered were scared, lost people who wanted to defend their country, who signed up for a thing that became something else. We're in a sovereign nation. We can't make this call, Coloulton. Not in cold blood. Please, let's just go get you some help. And that's where David tells him, I can't. There's so much blood on my hands, Cap. Cold and warm. That blood has to mean something. Has to be for something. And it's right here where David notices that he missed a spot, as he goes on to say, and if that means I have to freaking bathe in it until freedom takes hold here, then that's what I'll do. As he goes for the murder shield throw, only for Steve to throw his shield for the last second save. And from there, the two of these guys go at it. Because from the start of the series, and really all throughout this 5-part story, we've been given this comparison between Steve and David, where the two of them had a very similar beginning. that later led to them being two very different people. And now it's like we're seeing the belief systems that both of them had formed individually, physically go toe to toe. And as this happens, we go back to the beginning of David's letter, where he says here, "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't think you were right, but I wasn't either. The world has gone mad, but I don't know what the cure is. All I know is that it turned me into a killer, with the idea that if I murdered the right people, or enough of them, then others would have the kind of freedom you and I have." And after getting the upper hand, Steve tells him here that the soldiers and evac team are on their way, so they're going home. But then that's where Slate shows up, ready to shoot Steve in the back. And she's just like, "I'm sick of you freaking Captain Americas," just before she squeezes the trigger, only for David to hop up, grab the shield, and save Steve. And poor Slate catches another dose of Captain America when David takes her down with the shield. And now David's just like, "Oh, never could get that shield to come back." Ooh. But in David's case, the serum that was created to give him the same abilities as Captain America, it wasn't an exact one-to-one match, so there's times where he suffers from the drawbacks, and this is one of those times. And when he collapses here, with heart failure, struggling to breathe, he asks Steve, like, "Man, you wouldn't happen to know CPR, would you?" Only for Steve to tell him, "I'm sorry, I don't know what that is." Because Steve went down in the ice in the mid-40s, and CPR didn't come around to the 60s. And given the time where this story takes place, Steve really hadn't been back for that long. So there's still quite a bit he needs to catch up on. But right now, David's still losing consciousness. He says here, "Partnered with a man at a time. We did this, Cap. America backed Doom." So it's right here where he lets Steve know the truth that he was told. And before he blacks out, he tells Steve, "If I don't make it, I need you to tell her losing me was worth it." Which for David, this refers back to his mom, who was always afraid of losing him, like they lost his older brother, which is why she stopped talking to him again when David returned to the military in 2006. And now for Steve Rogers, when he learns the truth here, he doesn't even go back with the troops. In fact, he doesn't even go back to speak with General Ross until a month later. And when he returns, the army of course has him in cuffs. But General Ross believes that Steve's come back to atone for his disappearance. Because when Coloulton came back, Ross was told that Rogers had just walked off into the woods. And Steve's like, "Yeah, that's what I did." So the general asks him, like, "Where the hell did you go?" And that's where Steve tells him that he took some time to clear his head and see the world that he ended up in. And he tells Ross that he went to talk to people to find out if America's still a place worth fighting for. And he says here a lot of people said no. They had their reasons, good reasons from the sound of it, and how in the time where he came from, his reasons were similar. And he goes on to tell General Ross, America was far from perfect, and that hasn't changed. I don't think it ever will, because that's what our country is about, what a dream is about, striving. I signed up during wartime. That war is long gone, but there are still fights worth having. The people of this country and this world are worth fighting for. And that's where Steve gets in his face and he's like, "You overthrew a government in Latvia." And General Ross is like, "Yeah, a corrupt one." And Steve tells him, "But that wasn't your reason, was it? Doom offered you technology, resources." And that's where the general's like, "Tread carefully, Rogers." Only for Steve to request a discharge, because he's done. No more blindly taking orders. And if Ross happens to need him for a mission, Steve's going to choose what mission he's going to take. And he tells General Ross if he hides anything from him again, that he better pray that Steve don't come for him next. And you already know Ross don't like that type of talk. So he denies Steve's discharge, because he still considers him military property. But then someone else approaches to talk about their retirement as well. And that someone else is Tony Stark, who again at this point in time was still acting like him and Iron Man were two different people. But he just makes his way into this conversation like, oh, is that Captain America? But we find out here in the next room, David Coloulton's undergoing surgery to get Tony Stark's heart-saving technology installed in his chest. And he just strolls in like no applause necessary, happy to make up for the malfeasance of whatever untested drug they pumped into that soldier years ago. Then he's like, "Oh, I couldn't help overhear you denying Captain Rogers his well-deserved retirement, Ross." And that's where Tony gives the general an ultimatum, because he's basically like, while we're on the topic of retirement, Tony goes on like he was thinking of retiring himself, which would mean no more sweet Stark tech weapons going to the military. So he asks the general who would he like to retire the least. And the general gives Tony this look like, "Well, I like my weapons." But effectively, this is Tony getting Steve off the hook, scot-free. So as the two of them leave, Tony's like, "Steve, is it okay if I call you Steve?" And Steve's like, "Yeah." Then Tony's like, "You want to grab a drink with me, Steve? Celebrate life as private citizens?" And that's where Steve's like, "Do they still have beer these days?" And Tony tells him, "Do they ever?" Because Tony loves his alcohols. And later on, when Steve makes his way to Avengers Mansion, he's now greeted by Iron Man, who makes sure to let Steve know that Tony Stark tasked the best Avenger to show him around. And now, like we saw back in issue 1, since Steve Rogers had come back, Iron Man had been trying to get him to join the Avengers, but at the time when Steve was fresh out of the ice, he told Iron Man that he's a soldier and he's got to go back to base. But now that Steve's saying things like I'm no longer a soldier, this has Iron Man asking what made him decide to finally join. And Steve tells him that Tony put their mission in terms he could understand. He was clear and to the point. Avengers help people. So Steve's like, if he's going to figure out this world, then helping people's the best way to do it. Simple as that. And before Iron Man leaves, he tells Steve, oh hey, there's a package for you on the desk there. I'll let you settle in. Dinner's at 5 because Thor's going to a concert, if you can believe it. And when Steve opens this package, the first thing he sees is a letter written by Reed Richards that says the world never forgets heroes. I'm glad you're here. And when Steve looks inside the box, he finds a Bucky Barnes action figure, which is a callback to the latter part of a conversation between Steve and Reed, back when Steve went to Reed to learn more about Victor Von Doom, before heading to Latvia with David Coloulton. Because in that conversation, Reed told Steve that his dad basically worshipped Captain America as he was growing up, just before he pulled out this Captain America action figure that Reed had since he was 8 years old. But towards the end of this talk, Reed was really just trying to let Steve know how much he means to people, with Captain America being the kind of guy who fights evil wherever it lives. But it came to a point where Steve was like, man, did they make one of these for Bucky too? And Reed told him, yeah, but it wasn't until this moment when Steve finally got to see it. And Steve looks at it and he says here that he's going to keep fighting so that it all means something, which is similar to what David Coloulton said at one point. But it just goes to show us again how Steve and David had their experiences and turned out to be very different. So yeah, following this story, we're going to be picking up more of the present day events that came after, like Dungeons of Doom and a lot of the Avengers Armageddon tie-ins as well. But with that said, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.